This is referred to in the Bible and Sumerian text as the firmament. The other half of Tiamat becomes Earth. The Earth is thrust into a new orbital position, carrying with it Tiamat's main satellite, our moon. Nibiru, the intruder, is cast into a permanent clockwise silver orbit, returning to Earth's neighborhood once each 3,600 years, forever becoming the 12th member of our solar system.
This tale of creation echoed through all the ancient cultures, becoming part of the scientific knowledge that we find in the Old Testament, in the creation story of Genesis.
In the aftermath of the collision, the biblical creator Elohim proclaims,
"Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And Elohim called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called seas.
If Earth is the orbital remains of a planetary collision, scientists believe that the most obvious place to look for planetary scarring is 7 miles below the surface of the Pacific Ocean.
When in the heights heavens had not been named, and below earth had not been called, naught but primordial Apsu, their begetter, Mamu, and Tiamat, she who bore them all. Their waters were mingled together.
2 planets mingled together. The biblical passage of Genesis reads,
"In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, Let there be light. And there was light."
If we apply the knowledge of the Mesopotamian text to the biblical text, the correct reading of the book of Genesis emerges, especially in relation to waters.
And Elohim said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." And Elohim made the firmament, dividing the waters which are under the firmament from the waters which are above the firmament. And Elohim called the firmament heaven.
Upper waters? Lower waters? What does the Bible mean by this? The Sumerians describe Uranus and Neptune as watery planets. What are the conclusions of modern science? In 1979, 1980, and 1981, Pioneer and Voyager visit Jupiter and Saturn with their many moons. During these missions, water is discovered virtually everywhere, as ice on the surface, and as water below the surface. The Sumerians' ancient claim of water on Jupiter's moons Io and Europa is proven. The Sumerian records indicate water on Enceladus and Tethys, 2 of the moons of Saturn, and in that planet's spectacular rings. The findings of NASA confirm these ancient Sumerian assertions, giving further credence and clarity to the biblical quote, "waters above the firmament." Halley's Comet travels through space, itself a spectacular confirmation of the biblical claim, "waters above the firmament." Nearly 4 billion years old, with a core half the size of Manhattan Island, this mystic traveler throws off water at the rate of 30 to 70 tons a second, with enough mass to continue its purge for thousands of years. Was ancient man aware of this spectral vision?
The unusual celestial object, reported in Babylonian texts to have been seen in the year 164 BC, is believed to have been Halley's Comet. Significantly, it was considered the scepter star of Israel.
In the Bible, the book of Numbers records,
"I see it, though not now. I behold it, though it is not near. A star of Jacob did course. A scepter of Israel did arise."
Halley's Comet and its lights are truly the messengers of Genesis.
when the 19th century astronomer Schiaparelli announced that he had seen canals on Mars, he was ridiculed. So too was the respected American astronomer Lowell in 1916. When NASA's unmanned spacecraft visits Mars in the 70s and again in the 90s, ample evidence of water in that planet's past is revealed. Images from expeditions to Venus and Mars exhibit visual evidence of dry sea, lake, and riverbeds characteristic of the biblical reference, waters above the firmament. Even Mercury, so close to the Sun, seems to have had a watery past, yet maintaining ice at its polar caps. The NASA report reads, quote, "We are forced to no other conclusion but that we are seeing the effects of water on Mars," unquote. And, quote, "Mars once had enough water to form a layer several meters deep over the whole surface of the planet," unquote. What we previously believed to be a dry and barren planet unexpectedly emerges as a planet where water once existed in abundance. Mars joins Venus, Mercury, the Earth, and most recently the Earth's moon in corroborating the Sumerian concept of water below the firmament.
With the discovery of water on the moon and distant planets, the possibility of colonization suddenly becomes much more viable. Oxygen can be extracted from the water to be used in domed habitats on planets with minimal atmosphere. And water is one of the principal ingredients of rocket fuel. This find increases the possibility of unlimited treks across the stars.
We've had reports to the effect that the Viking equipment will never determine positively whether or not there's life on Mars. Can you set us straight on this?
Well, my own view is it's much too soon to decide whether we will have a definitive answer. It may be that there is an exotic biology on Mars. It may be that there's an exotic chemistry which looks a little bit like biology. There's a number of experiments to be done. They might decide the issue, they might not. But either way, Viking has been a biological success because the chemical explanation means that there is a kind of chemistry on the Martian surface which simulates some of the steps of chemistry in biology. We would learn something important about the origin of life.
In October 1988, the Soviet Union sends two unmanned spacecraft, Phobos 1 and 2, named for one of the Martian moons, to study the red planet. Phobos 1 is lost while on its way to Mars. But Phobos 2 arrives to orbit Mars and immediately sends images back to Earth. On March 1st, 1989, pictures of this unusual grid are received. The grid, here in the upper right, is shot both in the optical range and in the infrared range. Later, they are merged into this composite overlay. On March 26th, Phobos 2 sends these images to Earth, taken just south of the equator. An unexplained elliptical shape appears.
This shadow actually appeared all of a sudden. Why am I calling it a shadow? Because you can see things through it.
This elliptical shadow, then, is it in Mars' atmosphere or on the planet's surface?
One thing is for sure, this something is not positioned horizontally.
Well, to me it looks like a rocket taking off from the surface of Mars and leaving a trail behind.
Well, if you'd want to fantasize, it could be interpreted that way too. Now we think we ought to look at the real circumstances that have caused that trail, even though they haven't yet been fully clarified. That's more likely to be the shadow of some object, since surface elements can be seen through it.
How long will it take to process all of the information to get more or less objective scientific results, rather than fantastic ones?
Come back in a week.
1 week later, no details are given. Then, unexpectedly, this report.
Last year, the Soviets launched 2 spacecraft to the planet, both named after the Martian moon, Phobos. Their mission was to photograph Mars and land probes on its moon. One was accidentally switched off by a mission operator. But the second reached Mars and transmitted pictures that are still puzzling Soviet scientists. As it swung over the equator, it took pictures from a height of 6,000 kilometers. This is an infrared photograph. It shows differences in temperature. The dark patches are colder. This section covers 600 kilometers. It shows objects down to the size of 2 kilometers. It's the most detailed infrared picture of the planet's surface.
We have some very, very thin lines on the surface of Mars in the infrared, which means it's heat, and it's not